Psalm 107:2 says, "Let the redeemed of the Lord tell their story, those he redeemed from the hand of the enemy." It's easier to share our successes than our failures, but this is not my story, it is God's story in me. My hope is that it encourages you that no matter our past hurt, pain, failures, or mistakes, God can make us new and use our mess as a message of hope and redemption. I grew up in a Christian home. I went to a small Christian school and then on to a Christian college. My dad was a pastor, so I spent a lot of time at church and knew a lot about God and the Bible. I prayed a prayer asking Jesus to save me more than a few times growing up, was baptized at the age of 11, and believed in what the Bible said about faith in Jesus saving me and knew I wanted that. As I got older, somehow this got harder to live out. My faith roots were pretty shallow, which became evident when I left for college. I grew up with a lot of rules, but not a solid concept of grace and the unconditional love of our Father, which translated to religious activity and a growing lack of commitment to spending time with the God who seemed to just want me to conform and didn't really care about the details of my life. In my growing apathy, I didn't go to church unless I had to. And when I did go, I didn't really listen. I had heard it all 1,000 times anyway. I didn't read my Bible unless it was for a class. I didn't know how to pray like I was talking to Jesus. My prayers were canned and not really from the heart. After college, I moved south and wanted to be on my own and finally be away from so many rules. I quit going to church altogether. I was so tired of judgmental people and feeling like I couldn't be good enough anyway. It was just easier to do what I wanted. I ended up in a relationship that wasn't healthy. I was always pretty unsure of myself and I struggled to figure out what I should be doing and what life was about. Everyone else seemed to be moving on with life, but I felt stuck. Fast forward a few years and I found myself engaged, but not so sure about it. I ended up trying to talk myself into it for a few months, but 2 days before the wedding, we called it off. That was crazy hard and I wasn't sure I was going to survive it. I was an emotional wreck. I stayed with a friend for a few weeks to try to get my head together and then made a series of very poor decisions. About 3 months later, I knew something was not quite right. I believed abortion was wrong and I had never considered that an option, but I was in a pretty bad place to try to process having a child. I was lacking direction and trying to figure out life, and these circumstances completely overwhelmed me. The shame to my family was too hard to face, and I felt like life was suffocating me. I would have told you abortion is wrong. But I also didn't believe a lot of the things I was doing were right, but I did them anyway. When you're backed into a corner and struggling already, it's easy to suddenly justify things that you would have said were wrong. Satan is a liar. He kept whispering to me all the reasons I couldn't do this, emotionally, physically, financially. He put someone there to mention this as an option to me, someone who had made the same choice. I believed the same old lie he told Eve in the garden. God must be keeping good things from me, and I surely know better than God what is best for me, and this was not good. But this is what stopped me in my tracks and forced me to take a hard look at where I was, how I got here, and where things would go from here. It was my crisis of faith moment. I always have a hard time when I share the details of my past, but I believe if I keep this to myself, God cannot get the glory he deserves for how he held on to me and pursued me through it, and how he has redeemed my past and used it for good. And I cannot help others if I don't share the deep pit God pulled me out of. I made the wrong choice. About 2 weeks later. And no matter what your opinion is on abortion, until you live through it, you cannot know how emotionally damaging it is. I had distanced myself from quite a few people and had no way to cope or deal with everything that was happening. I couldn't tell anyone. That was the point of the decision I made. I couldn't deal with either the short-term pain of the judgment I would face from people or the long-term problem of raising a child with a huge mess of a situation. Shortly later, a friend from college who didn't know the details or my decision reached out and invited me to her church. I decided to go even though it was uncomfortable. I had hit rock bottom and really had nowhere to look but up. I actually listened this time because I was desperate for hope. It was the beginning of my journey back to him. When I look back, I can see God gently pulling me back to him through the next few years. I saw and felt a sense of grace that I had not really known before. It has taken me years to fully understand that God can forgive all our sin and his grace covers our past, present, and future, and that he cares about the details of our lives. I wish I could tell you my heart was instantly healed and my faith fully restored, but it was a long process. My faith did begin to grow, and I began to understand that a relationship with Jesus was a commitment and also a daily choice. I had all the head knowledge my entire life. What my painful circumstances did for me was drop me to my knees and show me I could not do life without Jesus. For many years, I still thought about my decision every day. It haunted me. As I began to really get into my Bible and read it cover to cover, looking for answers and healing, I found several passages that hit home for me. I also felt God impressing on me to go get help through counseling. I found the Heart program at PDHC, and it was life-changing for me. They walked me through a process that enabled me to truly accept forgiveness from God and from myself. Psalm 103 and Psalm 51 were a few of the scriptures God gave to me that pulled me through to finally feel free and forgiven and propelled me to want to channel that into helping others in similar circumstances. Because God gave me this, I signed up the next fall to volunteer at Delaware Pregnancy Resources, and once a week would go answer phones and meet with clients to help them through pregnancy and to learn about becoming a parent. Although I knew I was called to do this, many times I didn't feel like I was making a difference. I wanted to see what I was doing was having a positive impact. But it's usually a long process of investing time into people's lives over a long period of time. I'm thankful I was fully convinced in what He was calling me to do and was able to leave the results up to Him. In the same way that God lifted me up out of a pit, I want to extend a hand to you. I believe God calls us to share our stories with each other so that He gets the glory. So be encouraged that no matter where you are now or have been, your situation is not hopeless, that God holds on to us through our mistakes and circumstances that are painful, and He can use them for good.